Welcome, everyone. We're diving into, well, arguably the most complex relationship in global affairs today, the United States and China. If you've tried to follow the news, you know it's just a blizzard of information, often with wildly conflicting views. Our mission today, let's try and cut through some of that noise. We want to pull out those crucial, sometimes, counterintuitive insights that help you really understand what's going on and why it matters so much. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start with something this tangled?
It's a great place to start, precisely because it is so tangled. You've got layers, right?
Yeah.
Military, economic, cultural, even deep history playing a part. So today we'll focus on just a few specific points, ones that often get debated, to hopefully give you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture.
Absolutely. Okay, first up, this debate that's been around for, decades now. Is China always on the verge of collapse, or is it actually a stable growing power? You hear this phrase like they're perpetually on a hot tin roof about to fall. What's the real insight here? Collapse or something else?
Well, the key thing, and it's often missed, is that this whole collapse idea, it's been predicted for, 30 years now? And it just hasn't happened. Instead, you've seen this pretty remarkable sustained growth and, stabilization. So the real takeaway isn't just that they didn't fall, it's maybe why. There's this deeply ingrained historical fear of chaos, they call it Luthan, and that fear has actually kind of fueled this relentless drive for stability and control. It's a paradox for outsiders, They see the growth, but then they also see increasing repression.
Right, so if the internal story is this powerful growth, why the heavy hand? Why the increased repression, the detentions, the party controlling the courts? What's the perceived need for that much control if things are supposedly going so well?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it circles back to that fear of Luan from Beijing's viewpoint, managing 1.4 billion people. Well, they see rock-solid political order not just as nice to have, but absolutely critical. History, as they see it, teaches that when the center weakens, chaos follows. So strong central control, necessary. That's the argument. Now, the sense of sort of raw fear might be less than, say, the early 80s, but there are definitely internal tensions, unhappiness within the elite even. Some even suggest that the current level of repression goes against advice from, believe it or not, Xi Jinping's own father back in the day, who apparently argued for allowing different opinions within the party. But despite all that internal debate, the dominant thinking seems to be China keeps growing, stays stable, gets stronger, more educated people travel, they come back, they contribute. That's the projection.
Okay, so the internal picture is much more complicated than just hot tin roof. Interesting. But what about the external friction? Where are the real flashpoints? I'm thinking particularly military stuff, Western Pacific. What's driving their perspective on that?
Yeah. Well, a big one, a really significant source of anger from their side is the aggressive naval patrolling by U.S. ships, sometimes really close, like 12 miles off their shores. They consistently bring this up as something that deeply upsets them. And here's a fascinating angle you sometimes hear, the idea that what you do today, China will do tomorrow. So the prediction is, if the U.S. patrols aggressively near China now, eventually the Chinese Navy will do similar patrols off, say, Hawaii or Guam, maybe even California, like a mirroring effect.
Wow, okay, that's a stark prediction. But the U.S. always frames these patrols as defending freedom of navigation, right? Yeah. Which sounds like something everyone, including China, would want. How does that justification square with the anger you mentioned, especially since China's economy depends so much on those sea lanes?
And that's the irony, exactly. China is the world's biggest exporter. They absolutely need freedom of navigation, probably more than anyone. Their issue isn't the principle itself. It's the way the patrolling is done, how close the ships and planes get. That's what they see as aggressive, provocative. They'd likely say they're happy to cooperate on ensuring free seas, but these close-in patrols feel different to them, not cooperative. But then there's another layer, a more nuanced view they might have of the U.S. military presence. Some analysts suggest China might, quietly, even value the U.S. defense alliance with Japan. Why? Well, the thinking goes if the U.S. steps back, Japan might go nuclear, and China would prefer that didn't happen. There's even this almost unbelievable historical anecdote. Mao Zedong supposedly told Henry Kissinger back in the 70s to look after Japan.
Wait, hang on. Mao told Kissinger to look after Japan. Seriously, that just turns the whole simple rivalry narrative on its head, doesn't it? What does an anecdote like that really tell us about the hidden dynamics here?
It tells us that beneath all the surface friction, there might be a deeper, more pragmatic calculation about regional stability. It suggests that even adversaries can have these, unstated shared interests in keeping certain things as they are. It adds this layer of unexpected complexity. It hints that maybe some parts of the U.S. presence, despite all the tough talk, might be seen by Beijing as less destabilizing than the alternatives.
That definitely gives you a different way to look at it. Okay, let's shift gears. Another major point of contention.
Yeah.
The South China Sea.
Yes, the South China Sea. It's genuinely complicated. You've got a whole bunch of claimants. The Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and China, all claiming bits and pieces. Now, China has certainly claimed and built on a lot of land there, no question. The argument you sometimes hear presented is that they didn't start this game. The suggestion is that the initial claims were actually smaller ones, maybe by Malaysia or the Philippines' tiny areas, like 2 or 3 acres. And China, according to this viewer, only responded after that started, but with much, much larger claims, like 2,000 acres. Once the game, as they put it, was underway.
That's a provocative argument itself. China didn't start it. So this information suggests their big claims were a reaction. How does that reframe the usual picture of China as the main aggressor there? And what about this idea of Chinese restraint? That sounds counterintuitive.
It definitely complicates the narrative, yeah. It suggests China's actions were maybe reactive, even if the reaction was, hugely disproportionate in scale. And yes, the restraint argument, it sounds surprising, but the point made is this. China could physically remove soldiers from Malaysia, the Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam off those islands, probably within 24 hours. If they really wanted to be maximally aggressive, they could do it. The comparison sometimes made is unlike what the United States might have done back in, say, 1897. So the fact they haven't done that is presented as a form of restraint. As for how it gets resolved, the prediction is eventual bilateral negotiations, bit by bit. And historically, China has apparently been quite generous in settling its land borders. Only 3 unresolved exceptions worldwide, it's claimed.
Okay, hold on. Generous might raise an eyebrow for some people listening, especially thinking about the South China Sea right now. Can you elaborate a bit? What did generous actually mean in those past border deals? And why does the South China Sea seem so different if that history exists?
That's a fair point, yeah. In those past land border settlements, generous often meant being willing to concede territory that maybe was historically claimed but wasn't strategically essential, in return for getting a final settled peaceful border. Give and take. The big difference with the South China Sea, clearly, is these are highly strategic maritime claims. They involve resources, shipping lanes. It's different. And China's actions there, now building islands, military installations, are seen by others as creating new facts on the ground. That makes concessions much harder politically unless they feel they're getting something significant in return. So how it gets resolved, the thinking goes, really depends on whether China feels it's being cornered or if it feels it's being treated with, respect in the negotiations.
Makes sense. Okay, from one really tough issue to maybe the toughest, Taiwan. Often seen as the most intractable problem, the biggest potential flashpoint for major conflict.
It's interesting you say that because from a certain perspective, of a very long-term one, the argument is that the Taiwan issue is actually very easy to answer. This gets back to that idea of the long view in Chinese strategic thinking, not thinking in years, but in decades, 10, 20, maybe 50 years out. It's a very different time scale. And the core concept here is something called interconnectivity between Taiwan and mainland China. It's not just, basic trade. It's how deeply interwoven the economies have become. Supply chains, massive Taiwanese investment in the mainland, millions of Taiwanese people working or living there. This creates this profound practical interdependence. So much so that the costs and the practical difficulty of actual attendance just keep growing. The idea itself, it's argued, starts to erode over time.
So the economics act as a kind of silent, long-game unifier.
Okay.
What about the rest of the world? Where do they fit in this picture?
Well, that's the other part of the equation. There's a strong conviction in this view that no country in the world today is going to recognize Taiwan as an independent country. Full stop. The handful of mostly small countries that still recognize the Republic of China, Taiwan's official name, they do so, it's suggested, basically because Beijing kind of allows it, lets Taiwan save face, you could say. So the argument follows. There won't be a conflict over Taiwan. And the Taiwanese people themselves reportedly increasingly understand that the correlation of forces, as it's put, is working against them, which is basically a polite way of saying China's military and economic power is just getting too big to ignore or realistically oppose indefinitely. There's a really compelling anecdote from back in 1991. Fred Chen, who was Taiwan's foreign minister then, apparently said something quite stark. He said, look, all China would have to do is announce a blockade. Just announce it. The insurance cost for shipping would skyrocket instantly. And that alone would, quote, kill Taiwan's economy. No shots fired.
Wow. That Fred Shen anecdote really, really drives home the economic leverage, doesn't it? We've covered so much ground today, so many different arguments, perspectives. It's clear this U.S.-China relationship is just incredibly complex. And understanding that long-term thinking you mentioned seems absolutely key.
Absolutely. I think what this whole exploration really underlines is you've got these deeply held beliefs on both sides, shaped by history, shaping the present, and getting up to speed quickly in such a complex area often means, well, just appreciating that there are multiple perspectives, even ones that seem to contradict each other at first.
Yeah, indeed. It definitely leaves us and you listening with a lot to think about beyond just this conversation.
And maybe one final thought to mull over. If it's true, as some suggest, that China tends to sort of mirror the actions of other major powers, especially when it comes to aggressive moves or posturing, well, what does that imply about the responsibility of all nations, the U.S. included, in setting the tone, setting precedents for how countries interact? And how might that ultimately shape the future of these flashpoints we've talked about?
That's a powerful question to end on. Thank you for joining us on this exploration today.